everyone, and welcome to another review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my partner Maggie,
Hello.
and today we are checking out the second expansion for Tapestry, Arts and Architecture. And what we're going to do is run through everything that comes in this box and let you know whether we think it's worthwhile adding to the base game Tapestry. If you would like to know more about what we think about the base game or the first expansion Plans and Ploys, we will link to those down in the description below. But for now, let's check out what comes in Arts and Architecture.
Well, lots of stuff. Probably the first and most obvious thing is a brand new track, an arts track. This is really now enriching the game in a whole new way.
A fifth track.
A fifth track. And so what this means is, again, well, it's an arts track, just like any of the other tracks is going to come with new landmarks. You're going to have to get 3 new landmarks to claim if you're the first one to go into those sections. And it also introduces these masterpiece cards. So these are, again, from an art space, it's, beautiful things are happening and masterpieces are being created. And so these masterpiece cards are allowing you to be built on your player board, and they'll usually provide you with a recurring thing or benefit at the time of your income. So sometimes it might be points, sometimes it might be resources, sometimes it might be a particular specific power. But yeah, they can be quite a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Particularly if you get them fairly early on.
Yeah, I really like them because whereas the technology cards, you need to be upgrading them in order to get their benefits.
Yeah.
These just get activated every time you have income. So it is like an extension to your income tracks on your player board. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
You always have 3 to draft from, just like the technologies. And sometimes if you see one, it might have a scoring condition on it that is going to get activated every time you do your income round.
Yeah.
And sometimes it plays really nicely into the strategy you're pursuing. So it can be worth actually a lot of points.
Yeah, if it's a really good synergy, it can be quite interesting.
I really like them. I really like thematically it's about our civilizations getting cultured.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like with them is because obviously it's its own track. It doesn't have any one particular resource attached to it to be able to move along that track, which gives you a lot more flexibility because you can use any resource to move. And then when you're going into the higher stages, it's any 2 different resources or any 3 or 2 of the same kind. But then the other thing that it unlocks is an ability to get those income buildings. And again, it's sort of like a wild, like you get to pick, which often with the main game, if you go through a track or either neglect a track or go through it and for whatever reason you didn't pick the bonus choice or the choice that allowed you to get those buildings, sometimes that's it. Like you have no
more opportunity.
Second chance. Whereas this brings in a bit of a second chance of, maybe it'll allow me to clear this up a bit.
Yeah.
The other thing, this is really interesting, is it has these new inspiration tracks. So this is one kind of replacement track for each one of your 4 income tracks on your player board. So when you manage to reach that light bulb inspiration moment, obviously because there's so much art and culture happening around you, it actually allows you to enhance that track in a way that it means that obviously as you're lifting those buildings off, you're going to be able to get a lot more points, a lot more bonuses along the way. So now there's really a huge incentive.
Yeah. My favorite thing about these new tracks is that if you're familiar with the base game, of course you are if you're watching this, the end space on each of the tracks is worth 10 victory points. And obviously it's advantageous to get rid of, remove the income building from that. So you're getting 10 victory points every income. This one is 15, so straight away it's an extra 5 victory points that you're going to be collecting, not to mention all the other little bonuses. I should say that in the box, every person gets 1 of each of the tracks, so there is enough for everyone to have all 4. And then you have 2 opportunities on the arts track to replace the tracks on your board. So I really like this.
Yeah, I like that
I wouldn't say
well.
it's essential, but
it's not essential, but
it's fun.
It does bring up the total number of points that you have access to.
It feels like I've done something now to upgrade my board, and that's a really nice addition to the game.
You only ever get to do, 1 or 2 max anyways. And it's interesting to kind of, if you're activating them or getting them earlier in the game, it's almost like hedging your bets of like, which track am I betting that I'm going to be able to clear as many, if not all, buildings from.
Yeah, and now to round out the arts track, the other thing that you get is 3 little tokens to cover up the spots where the different landmarks go. Because if you have the Plans and Ploys expansion, it did introduce these tokens to be able to see at a glance whether someone has already taken those landmarks from the general pool. We talk about this in depth in our Plans and Ploys. If you don't have Plans and Ploys, these 3 are going to be useless to you because you won't have the rest of the collection.
It won't be useless. It's just going to be, it's going to stand out in a weird way. Why is this the only track that has that? But
that is really to round out the experience for those who have the Plans and Ploys.
I really like expansion. That. But it's the same thing that we said before with those ones. It's like they could have been color coded in some way so that when you have all of them, you know exactly which tracks they're meant to go with.
So the next thing that comes in the arts and architecture box are some more landmark cards. This was introduced as part of the Plans and Ploys expansion as well, where we now have some private landmarks that we get to build when we meet certain conditions. These are drafted at the beginning of the game. And for example, you can build the castle if you had the castle at the end of the turn. If you moved into a tier that no longer had its corresponding landmark, so you were not the first person to get there, you will gain your castle, and that can be played into the city. It's a nice way, and we said this about Plans and Ploys. I like it because it gives you a little bit of a starting objective to get you going. I don't find them essential, but you really do love them.
I really like having something that, that I know it's mine and that it's protected, and that I don't have to worry about. I don't have to stress that anyone else is going to come and take it. So I really do like that.
But my favorite thing about these additional buildings or landmarks that come with arts and architecture is the fact that they are all throwbacks to Stonemaier games. So you've got the castle of like between 2 castles of Mad King Ludwig.
The little villa.
You've got a little villa from Viticulture, which is super cute. You've got a bird watching station from Wingspan. And then there's the clock from Pendulum. There's a little like pumpkin house from Charterstone.
Really cute,
and so anyone who's familiar with Stonemaier games is really going to appreciate those buildings.
That's quite nice.
I also like that it introduces a lot of colour. In general, the arts track is purple, which is like a fun colour, I think, for the theme of this track, as well as like lots of like yellows and oranges in the buildings.
And I love that the masterpieces, again, because they have illustrations on them, it's livening up my board or even just the table as you're kind of playing around. So it adds to the table presence, I find.
Also, we should say that on the science track, because you do get to roll a die and move on that corresponding track, there is a new die that is included with arts and architecture just to ensure that the arts track is represented on there as well. So that's just to update the game. But then we also get in this box some new Tapestry cards. And these Tapestry cards do a couple of things. Some of them refer to the arts track as you would expect, so you need to have them in only when you're playing with the arts track. Some of them give you ongoing benefits that stretch beyond that current era. So a lot of the previous cards sometimes had a power that only applied during that one era, whereas these extend across the game. But interestingly, there are also a couple of Tapestry cards that require you to build income or landmark buildings on them in order to get their benefits. So they're best played earlier in the game, where you can kind of then start to funnel some of your buildings onto them to be able to get those abilities or benefits. The next thing that comes with it, I don't know, how did you feel about the Tapestry cards, first of all?
I never really felt comfortable playing the ones where I'm going to be putting buildings onto them, mostly because I find I already struggle a lot with the capital city and trying to fill that puzzle out. And so I kind of found that would be distracting me from doing that. Again, if you're a more experienced player and you're more versatile, then you might really love them. But I found that I kind of stayed clear of those.
I found the opposite was true, because I don't actually enjoy that part of the game, the I guess covering my
the
city.
polyomino puzzle.
It's often not central to my strategy. I actually find it as a useful way to use my buildings that is more impactful than playing them over in my city. So I quite liked those.
I like the other cards, the artistic inspiration type cards with the tapestries that are kind of arts based. I did enjoy those ones.
Yeah. But for me, it's kind of like neither here nor there.
Yeah.
If you can shuffle them in and then they're
More
forever
variety.
in the game, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But what's probably more interesting is the new technology cards. So the new technology cards, we didn't get any new ones in Plans and Ploys, but now there are, well, first of all, there's some technologies that relate to the arts track as you would expect. But there are also technologies that require you to build a landmark building on top of them as the prerequisite to moving them or upgrading them to the top and getting that benefit. And that's quite hard.
Yeah, well, and again, for me, it's that choice between, a landmark building usually can help you cover a lot of terrain on your city puzzle. And so to almost not waste it, but allocate it to this other card, it felt really difficult. Like it feels painful to me. And I don't know if it's again because I really struggle to get landmarks anyway. So if they feel like they're few and far between when I get them. But it is cool that you can, when you build it on top of it, you can upgrade that card straight away. But then for them to be able to go all the way to the top, they need to have a landmark building on them.
It's quite a harsh condition in comparison to the other conditions which often relate to your neighbors as well. So, some of them will, you can't move, you can't play it until someone's moved to the second stage of a track. But you can look at your neighbors. This one actually requires you to build on top of it. And for that reason, I noticed that when we used those cards, a lot of people steered clear of them, which was interesting.
I tended to avoid them because I'm too scared.
Yeah, but it wasn't just you. It was a lot of players around the table that were just like,
this feels too hard.
That's too hard. I'm just going to skip that and get something else. So that's an interesting addition and change to the game. Then we have some new civilisations to play with. Only 5 in this expansion, but I quite like these 5. They were really interesting. It's not really bringing anything too new to the game, just some variation in those asymmetric abilities. I played with renegades, which is quite interesting because it gives you your own personal track. Which is really interesting because what you need to do is you need to forego a benefit when you would move onto that space on one of the other tracks in order to activate the benefit on your little civ board. And at the end of that track, you actually get 20 victory points. But what else is cool is that it still qualifies you for the complete and
end of track.
End of track goal. So if you're able to do that and I guess get the 20 points plus the additional points for coming first on that, that's a pretty powerful ability. Actually, when I played it, I didn't make it to the end and I was super frustrated. I think I was 1 resource short of making it to the end.
I think it's I've played with it and I've made it to the end and I've gotten all those goodies and I still haven't won. So,
Another track that I played, another civ that I played with and enjoyed was Relentless, because it changed my strategy in the game. Because in this one, you are needing to build in succession. So you need to be able to build an income building or a landmark in order to continue adding your little plague color tokens onto it. And then as soon as you don't do that, as soon as you don't build in a turn, they all come off and trigger the benefit. And that's a really interesting, it actually changed the way I did things because I was trying to clump together all of my building in one go so I could activate the stronger abilities. I thought Collectors was really cute.
Collectors was really cute because I didn't realize the first time we played with it, it was one of our friends who had it, and it was really funny because I didn't know what their civ was, but they just had this random little collection. It's what are you hoarding over there? It's one of everything.
A pile of stuff.
Yeah, and it's it's the Collectors where you're actually getting rewarded for each different unique thing. So sometimes it's for an outpost or one of the Tapestry cards or an income building or a tile, and so you end up with this really eclectic collection of things on your civ board, which is quite cute.
Titled Collectors are very cute and amusing. And then there's Urban Planners.
Urban Planners was interesting because it was one of those games where I play with this civilization and I did not use it at all because I'm very bad at remembering what's this thing that I need to be doing. But you're going to get points for adjacencies between your landmarks. It does allow, which is actually really tricky. Like they have to be orthogonally adjacent, so touching, and it's the largest string of connected landmarks. Which again, I struggle to get landmarks in the first place. But it can be particularly difficult if the terrain that you have, if your capital city has a lot of breaks in it. That would mean that then it becomes very difficult to connect them. However, what this does allow you to do is when you gain a landmark, you can actually put it onto your civ and then kind of build it later. So it allows you to do a little bit more planning. But I completely forgot about that. And it was one of those, like, I went through the entire game and my civ did nothing because I think I only ended up getting, I think I managed to connect 2, so it was like 4 points. But you can get up to a maximum of like 49 points if you connect amazing. 7, but that's like outrageous.
That's amazing. Yeah. And the final one is gamblers, and that was a really funny one because we were playing with my sister who had the gamblers, and the gamblers essentially get to play multiple Tapestry cards. If they can draw one that says when played, they get to play in addition to the card from their hand, which when played, it feels really quite overpowered. Like it was like, what, you're still going with your income turn? Like, how are you getting all of these benefits? Yeah. But she didn't win that game. No,
so that's why.
So, I mean, I don't know if it is overpowered or not, but it certainly feels like a really strong and really fun ability. She was having the time of her life playing multiple Tapestry cards. So that's the additional civilisations. I actually had a lot of fun with those.
Yeah, I enjoyed them as well.
I thought they were really interesting and just adding, again, more variety in the game. And the final piece of the puzzle here is that in arts and architecture, you are going to get some new city cards to build on. But they all have really interesting either configurations or little games within the game. So, for example, one of the most interesting, I think, is the archipelago, which divides it up into islands. So now you've got islands, and it makes it really difficult to place these big pieces onto these little islands. But whenever you complete an island, you do still get that bonus resource. There's some other interesting ones, like in the swamp. So the swamp is covered in these...
I don't know what to call those.
Lily
pads?
Yeah, the lily pads. And you want to build over them because at the end of the game, you're going to get -2 victory points for all of the lily pads that are still showing in the swamp. And then one of the ones that's quite interesting to me and felt like very powerful is this one called Mesa. And Mesa allows you can see that the blocked spaces are only around the edge, and so you've got all this open land to build on, and that feels super powerful. And actually, for me, who doesn't usually focus on building out the polyomino kind of part of this game, that definitely had my attention, and I was like, well, now I'm going to try and fill this up. The only thing is that you can't actually allow your landmarks to flow over the edge of this map because you do have so much space.
Like that and the urban planners together.
In combination with
like
the urban planners would be a super powerful combination. But yeah, again, I actually really enjoyed these
it's like a little
more
mini
advanced
challenge as well.
Yeah, more advanced city maps because I don't know, they just brought more intrigue into that part of the game. It was a little bit more challenging. So what do you think about the arts and architecture?
Yeah, I really like it. It's the only other thing that we haven't talked about is with the solo.
Oh, the solo.
So it obviously introduces it brings in a little tile to cover on your automa board, so that it's also now obviously counting for points that automa may get from advancing in the arts track. It introduces a couple of new civilizations. The scenarios from Plans and Ploys are not compatible with this expansion, at least at this stage. I don't know if it's something that they're going to reverse engineer or work out. They also introduce with the Shadow Empire, there's a twin variant, which is like I didn't like the Shadow Empire to begin with, but the twin is essentially just a second or an extra movement or track that gets triggered when the Shadow Empire moves. So there's this sort of little circle of, what's the sequence of all of these tracks. And so if the Shadow Empire is to move on this track, then the twin is going to move in this other track. The idea of that is because obviously the arch track is introducing a bit more, a few more benefits. This makes it a little bit more tricky because now you have an extra competitor for those landmarks. Yeah.
So
aside from that, it plays like the automa is still fairly well the same. Yeah.
So I guess the solo mode changes slightly in all three, like the base game, then Plans and Ploys, then Arts and Architecture. You're not a huge fan of the solo game as it
Overall,
is,
no.
But which one is? Which one's your favorite?
It's really tricky. It's like none of them really. Just because like I really dislike having to break the flow to like facilitate an automa. So I feel like probably my least favorite is going to be this one, because now I'm facilitating the automa, the Shadow Empire, and the Twin. It's like it's far too much. Like I'm doing far more for the automa than I'm doing for myself. And then it's like my turn is like 1 second, and I was like 20 minutes later facilitating the automa. Which again, like they're fairly straightforward, but I still found that like every time I'm kind of going, oh, okay, so this one moves here, and then what's the logic of this one? That's too much distraction.
So
for
the
me.
expansions are not adding to the solo experience.
No, it's actually making it more frustrating for me. I enjoyed the concept of the scenarios in the second in Plans and Ploys, because it's like, it's sort of allowing you to explore the game in a different way and kind of limiting to, you have these limitations, or you can only use these civs, or these tracks are out of bounds, or these are the only tracks that you can use. So that's interesting to me. But again, overall, it's not a solo mode that I enjoy. So
Yeah, well, obviously my favorite.
I really enjoy
addition,
multiplayer, so
my favorite addition to this game is 100% is the new track.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Same.
This game is all about the tracks, right? That is the core of this game, and introducing new track had everybody around our table very intrigued about how to best integrate it into their new strategy or to make it their core strategy, which you can do because the masterpieces that it affords you are really interesting because they're an ongoing income benefit that can be really powerful. So I really like that about this part of the game.
Do you think it's an essential? Would you say it's essential?
No. Again, I don't think it's essential because it's not really fixing anything that's broken about the base game. The base game is perfectly great by itself, but if you enjoy the game, I would not play it without the arts track.
I
now
agree.
that I have it.
Yeah, now that I have it, I wouldn't play without it.
Yes.
It does bring in even more limitations into it's already a table hog of a game, and now having to add an additional track, an additional market, it means that you again have to be very conscious.
It takes up
so much space.
Yeah. All of the new everything.
Everything.
There's so much stuff.
But I love the inspiration tracks. Again, the civs and the tapestry cards, I'm like, and the same with the technologies, like, take or leave them.
I mean, more is more.
It's
you
good
just
for
shuffle
variety.
shuffle them in, and you never think about them again because they're just part of the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that I would prefer to own Arts and Architecture than Plans and Ploy. So if you could only get one expansion, I would actually go for Arts and Architecture. I think it adds more to the game.
Well, yeah, that's a whole new track. It actually expands the game more fully. Whereas Plans and Ploys feels like it's just kind of
More
adding a
content.
little bit more content, not shifting or adding a dimension to the game.
And so that would be our pick if you had to pick one. But really, once you have both, you can throw them both into the game and honestly never think about it again as separate components, but all just one big game that really does work together as a whole. So that is our review of Arts and Architecture, the second expansion to Tapestry. If you'd like to check out our review of the base game and the first expansion, they're linked below. Please hit like if you enjoyed this review. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game reviews soon. But bye for now.
Bye.